Hello, Rahul. Great to have you on the show. Thank you for being here today.
Hi, Rose. Thank you for having me. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you are doing some really, really great work, and we have so much to cover during our conversation today. But to get things started, can you kick things off by telling the audience, who you are? Give us an intro.
Sure. Thanks. Again, thank you for having me. I started my career in the Marine Corps, doing supply chain and logistics. It was interesting when I got out of high school. I was actually, I was a freshman engineer, and I actually dropped out to become a Marine. And this was post 9/11, and I did a couple of deployments. I was in Japan, I was in Iraq, and when I came back, I decided to stay in Southern California. And I attended UCLA, worked at a startup, uh, worked at Amazon for about 6 years, identifying innovation at the corporate level. And then most recently, I was at DIU for about 2 years, specifically at the National Security Innovation Network as the regional engagement principal for Los Angeles. And so what that really means is, my job was to connect the defense ecosystem with technology startups, venture capital community, and the university research that's going on in Southern California. So yeah, that's me. And most recently, I don't know, maybe I'll share that later. Maybe towards the end. How's that?
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. And yeah, as you mentioned, you've worked across, the military, you've worked with startups and, identifying, as you said, innovation in big tech firms. And so what would you say is the number one skill or personal belief that has been consistently valuable and has propelled you throughout your career journey?
Yeah, I truly, and this is to the core of my being. I believe this that having strong relationships and really making sure that you're there for the people that you're engaging with, whether regardless of industry, regardless of position, none of that matters as long as you have a strong relationship that you're building, and you're good to people. I think they remember that. So no matter where you go, you're kind of the beneficiary of that relationship.
Yes, absolutely. I know something often told in the business world is your network is your net worth, and you're the average of the five people you spend the most time with. So certainly the relationships that we build and nurture around us, strengthen around us, those are so, so important, throughout our own lives. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and what's really interesting about that is that a lot of folks might think that, hey, like, when you go somewhere and you're like, well, these are the folks that I have nothing to do with this particular industry, or maybe so and so can't help me, right? But in reality, you don't know who they know, and
Mm.
so every person is worth your time, your attention, your curiosity. I truly believe
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And to kick off our conversation, you have such an extensive career journey across, many different um, industries. And so I would like to focus first on the world of venture capital. So you work as a managing partner at Dual Use Ventures. And so now thinking about your work here, how would you say, for those who are new to the defense, the concept of defense tech in our audience or dual use, how would you say investing in dual use technologies, as is the focus at Dual Use Ventures, how is that different from investing in more traditional or more commonly seen technology out there? And what unique challenges or opportunities would you say startups face when raising private capital compared to these other deep tech startups?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I started Dual Use Ventures back in 2020, when COVID had just kicked off. And so, I was an emerging fund manager. I had apprenticed under Andrew Zallison and Sky Fernandez. They're pretty well known VCs. I
Mhm.
mean, Andrew had the first check in, Twitter, Uber, Venmo. Pretty much like these massive behemoth companies that you can think of. And so what you really learn is that execution, teams, really the ability to build a solid team around you is really the key in these early stages, right? And one of the things that differed from regular kind of your SaaS, software, et cetera, kind of non-dual use sectors, is that you have a path. And whatever industry you're in or whatever vertical you're in, you know how to attack that because that's your industry. Those are the bounds, right?
Hmm.
Whereas in dual use, it's interesting because, and I just want to give a quick shout out to the Stanford Research Institute. That's kind of where I learned about dual use.
Hmm.
So a lot of the things that, Siri, for example, is actually dual use. It wasn't necessarily invented by Steve Jobs. It was actually from the Stanford Research Institute. A lot of things that the government or the defense apparatus has put money into researching, they sit on a shelf somewhere. And so, you know, dual use was really how do you take a technology that either was built for commercial purposes and you apply it into the defense world or vice versa. And
Hmm.
so one of the things is folks think that, hey, because it's dual use, you have just an abundance of opportunity. You can go this way, that way. But in reality, what I personally think it is that you want to use the early funding that the DoD gives you to build your product for the commercial world. There is
Hmm.
no there's no avoiding that. There's no avoiding going into the real world with your product or technology and needing to sell that into your industry or into your vertical. Just the dual use happens to be that, hey, on your way there, can you leverage non-dilutive government funding, and also can you find customers inside the DoD or inside the defense apparatus that will find your product useful, that will find your technology useful, because then you're getting that validation that, hey, this is useful for the mission. But ultimately, and I'll say this again, you have to kind of think about what is that commercialization application.
Hmm.
Otherwise, it becomes, it comes to a place where you might rely too heavily on the government or the defense department. And as you could see in today's atmosphere, what's going on around the country, and so it's not safe, right? So you just got to kind of be mindful and be very intentional as you create a dual use venture. So that's kind of my high, just kind of high level advice is be very intentional because resources are limited in these early stages, and so you want to make sure that you're spending time with the right customer set and making sure that your discovery is on point.
Yes, absolutely. And so it seems then, I know you mentioned a big uh, maybe step that startups kind of overlook is really taking into consideration, really being intentional about the commercialization. Is there like a starting point? Is it like conventional to start, with partnerships on the government side with the DoD, and then later on turn to private capital as far as growth and continuing to um, raise money for your startup? Is that kind of like the common path?
So I would say, sometimes you start off in a, you have the commercial technology and you find a defense use case. I've
Mhm.
seen a lot of that. That's actually very interesting. Whereas, you try to build a product for defense and then you find commercial use cases. That's
Mm.
a little less. I mean, that has happened, right? That has definitely happened. But I think what we're seeing more and more is, folks are building things in AI, robotics, et cetera, and then
Mm.
going out and finding use cases for the defense world. The best strategy is to get champions, right?
Mm.
Whether it's in the commercial world or inside DoD, you want to be able to have a couple of folks that really kind of get what you're doing and be your champions internally in their industry, in their company. And so that really helps because what happens is folks will start talking about you.
Mm.
And having two folks, three or four people talk about you and then go, oh, like this makes total sense. So that triangulation of that particular conversation is really beneficial to an early stage company, I think.
That's definitely really, really good to know. So, like, finding your champions is especially important in the early stages, just as you continue to grow and establish yourself in the landscape. So, yeah, absolutely. And you've had a lot of experience on the VC side as a mentor, as an advisor. Would you say you see like a common mistake? Like, is there a single mistake that you see startups make when working with the government? I mean, thinking to the DoD, these government partnerships are just really, really critical in supporting these startups and advancing, what the capabilities they are able to produce. And so, what would you say is the number one mistake that maybe inhibits these teams' growth, and how can they avoid these mistakes early on?
Yeah, I'll give you some context. The stakeholders involved in making a company, a dual use company, successful, as you can
Mm,
imagine. You have the company, their investors, the market, the DoD. Every single one of those stakeholders has a different math, has a different language, has a different business process and timing, right? So, what you need when you're a startup, you need to move really fast. And the government, by its very nature, cannot move very fast. And so, like understanding that buffer, what does that mean for your business operations, for your funding, for your burn rate, et cetera? What does that mean on um, uh, how you position your momentum to your investors, for example, right? Because a lot of folks, they might say, "Hey, I got a SIBR," and so you think that's revenue, but it's not, right? Like, so there's a lot of things that you want to be intentional about. You want to kind of play. You need to be a good translator when you're a dual use company. You need to be a good translator of, hey, the government said this. What does that mean for my startup? Because if you take apples to apples, it's probably not the same, right? Because your timing might be, hey, I can't wait a year and a half for this next batch of funding that the DoD gets, right? So, what does that mean to you as a company? And so, really, that relying too heavily on someone's opinion, relying too heavily on what someone said regarding making decisions for your own company, I think is something that I've seen happen. Someone will say like, "Well, we've just heard that they said they want to work with us." Well, that could be next year. That doesn't
mm,
mean now, right? So just kind
yeah.
of understanding and being critical of the types of these couple of dimensions that I've mentioned. You want to be very aware of those as you kind of go along your journey, because it's you know it's called valley of death for that very reason, because
Mm.
you can easily fail on any one of those dimensions and the company could tank. And so I think being aware, having people by your side that advise you properly, who know all the different kind of languages, timing, business processes, is very critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And for listeners who aren't familiar with the term, could you explain what is the Valley of Death?
Yeah, the valley of death is really when you have you go, you will start working with the DoD, the defense world, and you might get some early stage funding, right? And you have R&D funding, maybe SIBR funding,
Mhm.
whatever that might look like. And so you think like you have some traction, right? And that traction, again, it comes down to the first comment I made, is like the commercialization aspect of it. To jump from, hey, someone just gave us some amount of money, non-dilutive capital, because they believe in us or they believe in the technology, does
Mhm.
not mean you're going to be successful.
Mhm.
And so that valley of death, it's what does that commercial plan look like? What is your foolproof plan in overcoming some of these obstacles you're going to face on the way to potentially getting bigger contracts or commercialization, because there's so many things that could go wrong, and least of which is running out of money, or not finding the right customer. Even after you find the right customer, if you don't understand procurement, for example, you're not getting anywhere. So
Mhm.
there's just a whole lot of details. Like, we can oversimplify things. We can say, oh, this is a startup, they're going to be successful, Series A, they're going to get they're going to be a program of record. But that's an oversimplification of all the things that could go wrong, right?
Mhm.
And so just being aware of that, that's kind of That's to overcome the valley of death.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. And so you mentioned it's so important for these startup teams to, stay adaptive and, responsive to obstacles as they encounter them, throughout the growth process, in between, as you mentioned, getting bigger, going on to the next government contract. There's a lot to navigate here. And so in a sense, like now that we have an idea of, what startups shouldn't do and common pitfalls they can avoid, is there a common mindset that these successful startups in the defense tech space have when approaching, just in their approach, and like what is something that really sets winning teams apart from everyone else? I know you mentioned finding your champions, staying adaptive, in the face of obstacles throughout the journey, but is there something specific that you've noticed among successful startups that you've seen or worked with?
I would say the most successful startups I've seen are kind of maniacal in how they pursue their particular problem set that they're trying to solve. So, for example, if you have a technology, the technology doesn't translate into capability. Like those are not interchangeable words, right? So when you're developing a technology as a startup, that's what it is. It's a technology.
Mhm.
DoD doesn't buy technology; they buy capabilities. And what that means is that that particular technology has to solve a particular problem that the DoD is facing. And so the more you're aware, the deeper you can go inside the problem is kind of that's where you're going to succeed, because you can come and say, hey, this technology is incredible, but if it's not really, if you haven't done the homework of really understanding the problem, the user, understanding how your technology is going to apply and be better than what they have as a solution, how it's going to be cheaper, faster, lighter, whatever it is. You have to really understand your problem set. And I think those founders that really know, their customer, and again, this is, it sounds pretty basic, but understanding your customer and understanding the problem set in a very, very deep manner where you can engage the user in a very, in very intricate ways. I think those are the teams that are going to win, because what happens is when they go back, the DoD goes back internally and has the conversation, you know, inadvertently they're going to say like, "Hey, this company really knows us,"
Hmm.
and that's who's going
Yeah.
to end up, kind of getting the win here. So I think, and it doesn't seem like rocket science, but really honing in on the problem set, talking to customers, talking to folks that are trying to solve those problems as well, right? Like, because you might think that you're going to have a novel approach, but someone's already working on it, right? So just understand who's attacking the problem, who's facing the problem, what the problem set looks like, the breadth and the depth. I think you'll be in good shape.
I think a follow-up question I have there is, considering that it's really important to get a really clear understanding of what exactly it is that the DoD or just different government partners actually need or asking, of these different defense tech startups, right? So these teams who have specific technologies and then taking it and actually addressing a real need that exists currently among government partners. What advice do you have for startups who are trying to identify these different government signals? So just getting a really clear understanding, like, okay, what is the current landscape today, and like, how do you fit into that equation?
Yeah, that's fair. So
Mm-hmm.
it's funny because a lot of companies, they'll wait for the solicitation to come out and then they'll
Mm-hmm.
apply, thinking that their technology applies. But in reality, what you want to do is engage what's called the mission partner early, right? Like that DoD
Mm-hmm.
unit, whoever you've identified that could potentially have this problem. You want to go to whatever industry days, or anytime they have an open opportunity to engage them, you want to, because it's like they're going to remember that hey, when we put this out and we were trying to understand our own problem, that these
Mm-hmm.
were the folks in the room that helped us. And so a lot of times what happens is that a lot of these solicitations get uh, they get refined based on the feedback that gets put in these early stages, right? And so you have a lot of these organizations, AFWorks, SpaceWorks, DIU, Ensign that do a
Mm,
lot of these problem curations and allow for industry to have input, and that's critical because that will then inform that solicitation later on as well. And so, if you're coming in barely, when the solicitation's out, you have missed the entire conversation that has happened previously.
mm,
And so, my advice is really engage early, engage often.
mm,
Sometimes, government folks, they have, there's rules and regulations, so you want to be mindful of that. But at the same time, you want to let them know that you're there for them because you are an industry expert in this problem that they're looking to solve, and so that they can rely on you. They can call you if they need to understand a particular thing, and you'll see that, again, it comes down to that relationship aspect of it, that they know they trust you. Trust is the real, trust is really the coin of the realm, right? Like, it's, you can have the best technologies, best everything, but if the trust is not there, you're not getting far, especially in the DoD. It's still very much that type of a business where you have to know, can you get, can someone introduce you into the fold? And there's still a lot of that, I think, in the DoD, that you really need trusted networks to get you in.
absolutely. It comes down to getting yourself out there, putting yourself in these rooms with, the different stakeholders you would work with, the different potential customers of your, specific product, that you're putting out there. And yeah, just getting feedback, having these conversations, putting like a face to a name, shaking some hands, and really just, building a trust, starting a relationship. And from there, getting a really clear sense from the people who are, you know, from the people who are in it, right? And getting a clear idea, hey, how can I best put myself in a position to support my end customer? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's really interesting, I thought, was, um, if you're in the industry and it's a problem that's, that you're passionate about,
Mm-hmm.
what typically ends up happening is that you might find that, you can advise the government or
Mm-hmm.
DoD on better ways to do things, even if it's not your own product or technology. And so sometimes that clarity creates that trust, right? Because you've now just sat through this problem, the problem curation process of this, and help the DoD entity think about this problem a little better. And so that generates trust, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't always have to be that, hey, like, I position my product, right in front of you every time you're talking to me, but it's more so really caring about, hey, like, this is for the mission, this is for the country, this is for national security. I want the best to be out there. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes maybe you realize that, hey, my solution, that what I initially thought was the solution to this problem, might not be. And you got to be okay with, still being part of that industry and saying, hey, like, maybe this is a better fit. And so,
Mm-hmm.
again, it doesn't seem intuitive to do that, but it generates a lot of trust, and that will carry you way further than, if you were to just every time try to sell your wares to the government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, something I would like to turn our conversation to next is thinking about the role that universities can play in shaping the future of defense innovation. Specifically, we can talk about here in LA. As you mentioned, you are a UCLA and USC alum. So, can you just talk a bit about that? Share your thoughts on, how do you see universities kind of joining this mission and helping to, innovate and really advance the defense tech landscape today.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat about that. I have been very fortunate in that I was able to attend UCLA for my undergrad, and later I did my MBA at Marshall at USC. What's really interesting is that both are very involved already
Mm,
in this defense world in different ways, right? Um, Specifically, how I think about them is, they're big brands like UCLA, USC. These are massive brands, right? And they have a lot of resources at their fingertips. They have a lot of innovation going on inside,
mm,
and the students, they're brilliant, right? Like, when you get out of school, you kind of go off and you start working, etc. But you forget how much time that these students can dedicate to some of these projects, and so you kind of want to, sometimes you want to peek back and see what they're doing, and see what's at the forefront of some of the research that these folks are doing. You might think that there's a solution out there in the marketplace, but in reality, these guys might have surpassed that, in the
Mm.
lab. And so maybe there's an opportunity to take something out of a lab and then go, commercialize it rather than what you're building here in this. So you don't want to operate in a vacuum, right? Like you
Mhm.
want to consider all the things that are there. Universities give you that great kind of staying in front of the, really at the forefront of research, et cetera, and then really tapping into the talent, like the minds that are over there. And so, in my position at Ensign DIU, we really worked with a lot of universities. We had a couple of programs called Hacking for Defense, which was started at Stanford by
Mhm.
Steve Blank. And, those types of things really kind of get you that connectivity between the mission, so real world problems, and some of these students that could solve these problems. There is no age limit to solve a particular problem. Yeah, you might be missing some of the data that comes with being experienced in the field, but at the same time, you can use that to your advantage, because a lot of times, if you know too much about a particular problem, it kind of, again, this might be an oxymoron to what I said before, but if you know too much about a particular problem, you might have blinders on, and so you need a fresh pair of eyes and stuff. So you can make that your advantage and use kind of some of the work that the universities are doing to augment what you're up to. Take advantage, see if there are any free resources that they're offering, because USC multi-billion dollar, UCLA multi-billion dollar, uh, you know, budgets, right? USC, I know
Yeah.
that they're doing a lot of work with the DoD. They happen to be the new hub for microelectronics, which is a big deal now for America, right? Making chips,
Mhm.
microelectronics, etc. So, really, kind of, it's almost like a hub of innovation, right? And you
Mhm.
want to see how you want to utilize it, see how you want to contribute to it. Sometimes students want to come work for you if you're a startup founder and you're
Mhm.
doing something really interesting. And vice versa, you might want to go sit in on a couple of classes or a couple of, events that they have, just to get yourself sharp on the particular problem, vertical domain, whatever. So I really, I'm very passionate about that, and I truly like working with the universities.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And you mentioned, there's some students and university research labs doing really, really amazing work to address these problems. And to want to address a problem and join a mission, you have to be aware of it in the first place. And so for someone on the outside who's listening to our conversation, how would someone, that's not already involved get themselves involved, at the university level or at the early career level? Like, what advice do you have for them? I mean, as you mentioned, universities are already a very, very big hub of innovation in this defense tech space. And so, what advice do you have there? Any specific resources? As you mentioned, there's so much activity going on in LA specifically. So, what would you share with the audience?
Yeah, I'll start off by saying that I started my college life in community college at LAVC, Los Angeles Valley College.
Mhm.
And so, even before you get involved with a university, I would say just like look, find that thing that you want to do,
Mhm.
and then start looking around in, wherever it might be, whether local, regional, national, like where are the things that are happening around that, right? Whatever subject that might be, space, defense, autonomous vehicles, robotics,
Mhm.
artificial intelligence, whatever that might be. And you can pretty much, through quick Google searches, see what kind of events are happening, who are the key players, and show up, right? Like showing up is half the battle, right?
Mhm.
Because you could sit at home and, kind of contemplate all the things you can do, or you could show up, engage, and see where you go from there, because you never know who you're going to meet. You never know what's going to inspire you to get into something, and you always got, kind of keep your mind open to the possibilities that could come out of that. So it's really following your interest, your passion, and hoping that there's either something already going on, or if it's not going on, start
Mm,
it. Like I've had many of those experiences where something wasn't happening that I really wanted to do. So I started it, and guess what? There are other people that want to do that too, and that could start off with something as small as a dinner with like 3 or 4 people. You get together and discuss this, and next thing you know, you could probably start a club at whether it's university related, non-university related, just like a community based thing. You don't need anybody's permission to
mhm.
contribute to meaningful problems that someone might be facing. So I truly believe that you really don't need anyone like to already set the table for you. Sometimes you need
Mhm.
to set your own table.
Mm. Yeah. No, that's really great, for the audience to hear, especially those who are very new to, the defense tech world, and just, this is our conversation today is kind of their first exposure or contact point with this kind of work. So yeah, absolutely. I love that, being being willing to show up and put yourself in these rooms, and then take the next step and connect with like-minded people who have the same interests, who share the same curiosity, and then from there find your people, build your community, and you never know what could happen from there. You never know who you'll meet, and what work you can go on to do after that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's awesome. You can I've this is a practice of mine from a very long time ago. Like if I found someone interesting, if I read an article, for example, and I saw someone quoted there,
Mhm.
and that was an interesting topic to me, I'd reach out to them. Like just get good at being okay with reaching out
Mhm.
cold to someone, saying that, hey, I read your work, I appreciate your work, I'm interested in what you're doing. Would you be open to chatting with me? And more than likely, you'll see that depending on how you phrase it, etc. But people are interested in talking about their work. That's what they do,
Mhm.
right? And so uh, it's a hack that you can get more information in how you want to proceed by just asking folks that are experts, or that are respected in the industry, on how to address a particular problem. In fact,
Mhm.
that will kind of get you, a mentor of mine who's an attorney and a theoretical physicist in Chicago. He said to me, every call he tries to make sure that the person that he's chatting with, that he can introduce them to 3 other people that they can chat with. And
Mhm.
so like that could be a practice that you develop, in your calls, is like, hey, who else might want to talk to me? Can you, think of some folks and get back to me, or can you make an introduction? I'd really appreciate that. And you'll see that folks are more than happy to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's really a really important point, and I'm so glad you brought that up, is not being afraid to reach out, because you never know, and you might be surprised how many people are out there that would love to help you, would love to, answer your questions, set up a coffee chat, and really just find ways to get you involved, especially those passionate about their work, and, are going on and doing amazing things, and are really looking to bring in, new folks, people with the energy, with the conviction and passion for the mission. You never know where those efforts might lead. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and the same gentleman told me once, which I never forgot, was that um, you as an individual, you have your own connections,
Hmm.
way of looking at things, etc.
Hmm.
So what you see as a one, two ones,
Hmm.
they might not know each other, right? Those folks. But when you combine them, it's actually an 11, right? Like instead of just a two, like you can actually combine these two circumstances and turn ones into 11s. And then hopefully, not every time, but hopefully there's somewhere that you can extract value out of that.
Hmm.
And that never left me, because it's true, right? Like folks, they're just they're doing whatever they're doing, but you might know two folks that don't know each other, or two companies, two technologies, whatever it might be, that when you combine them, their combined effect is way more amplified than if they were alone.
Hmm.
And you got to kind of start developing that type of thinking, in every kind of interaction you have, like, oh, well, maybe I should introduce you to so and so because that might be a great conversation for you, a great contact for you. This again, like, it develops trust, and the folks that know you respect you. You've just kind of given someone else a little credibility as well. You've transferred your credibility to them. So I think people appreciate that in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Finding those the synergies and finding a way to those strategic partnerships, and then being the person to bring two people together, and yeah, absolutely, I think that's a really good practice just to bring to conversations and any kind of interaction or kind of meeting or networking event. That is certainly a great practice to have. So yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to we've discussed like the importance of reaching out, making new connections, putting yourself in these rooms as someone coming into and entering this industry, and just really building your networks. And another question I would have is, do you think there's one valuable skill or yeah, I guess, yeah. So let's focus on that. I feel like, we've talked a lot about like the soft skills, the importance of being able to build a network and identify opportunities in the space. But would you say there's a maybe more technical skill or industry specific skill that you think current students or early career professionals should learn if they want to get involved in defense tech and, they're just starting out?
Yeah, I would say, most people try to either categorize themselves as technical or business.
Mhm.
They categorize themselves, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's like, oh, well, I'm an engineer, so I'm technical in nature, right? Like, or I did my MBA, so I just do business stuff, right? But in reality, you're one person,
Mhm.
right? And so integrating that thinking of, you know, just a cohesive understanding of what you're trying to explain, and making it simple enough for anyone to understand. Because it's easy to confuse someone or really talk over them with jargon,
Mhm.
but I believe simplicity is underrated. And, the more simple you can make something, the better you're going to understand it, the better they're going to understand it. Now,
Mhm.
of course, there are some technical topics that, that require a lot more, technical kind of analysis, et cetera. But being able to like have a cohesive understanding and then being able to communicate it, like that's the other thing. You might understand it, and, you know, um, you understand both aspects, but depending on the audience, being able to communicate that proposition, whatever that might be, whether you're trying to start a project, you need funding, you're starting a company, investors, whatever it is, um, understanding your audience, being able to craft your narrative
Mhm.
based on that, and then weaving in the, like you said, the technical as well as the non-technical aspects. It's a
Mhm.
skill, because some folks, they just dive deep into the technology and then they give you the numbers, and then you're like, all right, well, this was a very dense paper that I read.
Mhm.
And then some folks are like, they just write a whole bunch of fluff, and that's that's on the other side of that extreme. So
Mhm.
I think if someone is coming into this industry, having that ability to identify the tactical and the strategic and bringing them
Mhm.
together to communicate with stakeholders, I think not personally there couldn't be a bigger skill than that. Just because as you move up, right, the management, you own the company, you're in like a C-suite, et cetera. That's the skill that's required, is the ability to understand, and then ability to address different groups of people um, with the same message but in different ways, right? Like, so I think that skill of consolidating, synthesizing, and then communicating is very critical.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's certainly for those who I guess are early on in their career in this industry. That's a really, really good skill to have coming in, because as you mentioned, this is highly technical, but at the same time, there are many different stakeholders involved, as we discussed earlier. So being able to communicate your mission to many different types of folks is so, so important to succeed in this industry. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
Thank you.
that's the
Yeah.
difference between, you having a technology and you having a capability, right?
Mm.
Especially in this
Yes.
industry, right?
Yeah.
Because I hear this quite often. It's like, hey, technology is great, but tell me how this applies to me.
Mm,
What is the capability gap? Are
yeah.
you going to address the capability gap?
Hmm.
Technology looks great. There are many
Yeah.
technology, there are many inventors, but that doesn't necessarily make them, good founders. Let's just say. So
Mhm.
there's that. There's more to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that role. And, we've talked a lot about, your background, the work you've done so far, but looking ahead to the future, what are you most excited for? I don't know if now you'd like to circle back and talk a bit more about what you're up to today.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited. So, a couple of things. There's a incredible set of founders that I came across. Brennan Liu, Aaron Guo, and they started this company called Hybron. And I, I'm working with them as their chief growth officer. I'm excited because the technology that they've come up with is very foundational. And what I mean by that is it's truly dual use, which is, you can have defense applications, but you can have commercial applications. And what I thought was really interesting about them is that, they're building for both commercial and defense, right? And so, like I said, there's so many pitfalls that you can fall in,
Mhm.
but Hybron really has, really strong supporters, internal champions.
Mhm.
The process, the technology itself is amazing. They understand how to navigate the DoD. Hopefully, better now. We'll see.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm really excited to support them. And these two guys, they're incredibly brilliant. They're out of Stanford. And like I said, I started my dual use life at Stanford Research Institute. So there's that connection there. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited because of the capability that can bring the warfighter.
Mm.
Because in our, as you know, conflict is still abound across the globe, and so me being a Marine, I felt that there were so many times in the field out in war that I wish I had certain things. And now looking back so many years later, I think I want to do whatever I possibly can to give that edge to someone that's out there, right? And typically in that world, you're like 19, 20, 21 years old, and you just wish that you had some edge over your adversary. And I really, when I saw this technology in this company, I thought that this could be one of those things that, they could give our warfighters range, better range, right? Things that are made more efficiently, things that are lighter, faster, cheaper, right? Like all the things that you think are good in a particular capability, these guys have. So I'm excited to chat with them and work with them. Other than that, I'm building something strategic as well in the city of El Segundo.
That's right.
If folks are interested, I'd love for them to contribute. But it's an advanced manufacturing accelerator as part of an advanced manufacturing hub. El Segundo, it's its brand on its own, right? In the DoD, the Gundo has its own place,
Yes.
and so I wanted to contribute to that. I wanted to leverage some of the strengths that the city of El Segundo has, and
Mhm.
and bring that to our DoD. And so I'm excited for that. There are many groups involved, so you'll hear more about it. But if anybody wants to contribute to that, they can reach out to me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I personally can't wait to hear more about the work that you are doing there. And I mean, there's so much happening in LA, so much happening in El Segundo, and there's just so much work to be done. And, we're just getting started. So thank you so much. And if someone would like, if folks in the audience would like to reach out, where is the best place to do that?
Well, hopefully they can reach out to you. I like this.
Yes.
Again, I'm going to pull you into my community.
Yeah.
Hopefully they can reach out to you, but
Yes.
I'll share my email where you can find
Mhm.
me, and then maybe we can put that up in the
Yeah, in the show notes. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And no, in practice of what we were mentioning earlier, I'm happy to connect anyone who is interested in talking to Raul and learning more about what he's up to next and yeah, the work being done today. So thank you so much. And, Raul, you've just shared so many great insights today. Thank you so much for your time today. And I know our audience learned so much just about, the current state of the defense tech landscape and where we're going next and how they can get involved. So thank you so, so much.
Thanks, Rose. I really appreciate you having me, and I'm excited to see what's in store for you as you kind of scale this up. Anything I can do to help any of your audience members, yourself, I'm more than willing and able. So exciting stuff. I can't wait to chat with you all again. Thank you.
Thank you. I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, Rose. You too.